You're alive, you want to live, therefore you love yourself. Therefore, that is the only thing that you should define yourself by. Hey, I just got done mowing the lawn, just doing some thinking. So on the day of recording, this is my 26th birthday. I'm not sure when I'll release it, but I've noticed that a lot of my audience, 1 month in to making content, is pretty young, like high school age or even younger. And I mean, I think that this video is for everyone, but is maybe particularly about things I maybe wish I had known sooner or learned sooner. These past couple years have especially been filled with a lot of lessons. So, I just wanted to talk a bit about sort of my outlook based on 26 years of life. So, the first thing I like to remind myself, especially when I'm in a funk, maybe, is just how preposterous life is. Like, the atoms that make up our cells are 14 billion years old. We represent the culmination of a continuous procreation at least 500 million years old. And they've estimated that the probability of any one of our consciousness is 400 trillion to 1. I just think that that helps put things in perspective of just how absurd life is and how much I think we sometimes take for granted, and how bogged down in the weeds and into our own heads we can get. But I don't think that that's our fault, and that's something that I want to talk about. Is I think that during that time when we were evolving, death was an ever-present reality for the vast majority of our ancestors. Like, they evolved in a landscape, in a climate, when making mistakes, like whether it was not learning something fast enough or like upsetting someone or like not being productive or useful enough for your expectations or your community's expectations, like those failures could represent very real possibility of death or desolation. And I think that that's still the way we're wired to this day. Like, failure for many of us still feels like a death sentence. And that's not our fault. And if anything, I think it represents a source of forgiveness, like just understanding how powerful those evolutionary mechanisms are and how much they continue to dominate our psychology to this day. But I think doing something about it is our responsibility. Like, I think doing the work to understand the way you were brought up, your conditioning, the dynamics with your siblings, trauma that you've lived through, the way your brain works on a neurobiological level. I think all that stuff is really, really invaluable. And I mean, look, like if you're not struggling, then that's great. But I think we all have our blind spots, and choosing to not do anything about it, like whether it's because you think that you can do everything on your own or because you just don't feel like you're worth helping, I think either one of those things is immoral, actually, because the reality is if you operate from a place of either not caring about yourself or thinking that you need to go it your own, either of those things will inevitably lead to either your suffering or the suffering of those around you, likely both. I mean, that's sort of the reality of life in this world, is that suffering begets suffering, misery loves company. And so it's really not up to you to take care of yourself and get better. Like, I see this trend online a lot of sort of like bashing therapy and conversely like glamorizing depression. And have you ever had the experience of being underwater and trying to hold your breath for as long as you can? Like, maybe you're in a pool and you were playing a game with your friends when you were a kid and you're like, see who can hold their breath the longest. It's like, no matter how bad you wanted to win that game, every cell in your body was commanding you to go to the surface. And I think that that's such a beautiful example of how survival and self, I would view it as self-love. Some might view it as like self-protection or whatever. But either way, it's literally encoded into our DNA. Like it was forged in the fires of evolution and continues to try to protect us in those moments when fear is really justified. And to me that proves that like you want to live, you know? I mean, it's grim, but people jump out of a bridge and they survive, and almost all of them say that, you know, the second they jumped off, they wish they hadn't. And again, that's dark, but there's a series of logical assumptions that we can make that are, you know, we are alive, which means we want to live, and we know we're going to die, therefore we ought to live the best we can. And so choosing not to, like choosing to, like quote unquote, not care about yourself, which again, I really don't think is possible. I really think that's just delusion. It's really misguided, in my opinion. And look, I also don't mean to cast any judgment on mental illness. Like I've been through all of it, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And it's fucking hard. And you know, when you're in a place like that, you don't have the energy to do anything, let alone like, you know, ask for help and get better. But that really is what's needed, because like I said, the alternative is wrong, and it's only going to lead to you hurting the people around you more. And whether you believe it or not, you know, the world is better with you in it, and you are valuable, and you're here for a reason. And you know, I think for me, I've always been a perfectionist. I think, you know, it comes from sort of like family conditioning, and I think that that's really common and tragic, because failure is where all meaning comes from. Like obviously success is great and feels good, and it's worth celebrating, but it's the failures that you went through before that that makes it so meaningful. And I think so many of us are afraid of failure, and again, a lot of it has to do with those evolutionary wirings, of letting everyone down, or not providing enough, or not feeling like we measure up to those around us. And that is what's going to manifest those things actually happening. Like if you are unafraid of failing to reach your goals, then you're gonna reach them, because you're not gonna get discouraged. You're gonna keep trying. If you're afraid of losing someone and you try to control it and control them, and you know, fret over little mistakes and try to convince them, you know, of this or that, that's what's going to drive them away, because you're going to be desperate, and that's just not a place that is conducive to living a healthy and meaningful life. Whether it's, you know, perfectionism or addiction or anger or fear, I think it's our responsibility to notice them and to begin to unpack where they come from, and really do the work to understand, you know, why we are the way we are. Is this us? Is this something we picked up along the way? Is this something we were, you know, led to believe from a very early age? And then beginning to sort of firstly accept that, and then forgive and move on and integrate, and start charting forward with an understanding of ourselves that allows us to build goals for who we actually are versus who we might wish we were, or who we might think we should be. And doing so with, and this is sort of the key point I want to leave you with unconditional self-love. Because it's okay to want to provide for others, or to meet, let's say, your parents' expectations, like even to live up to maybe the identities that others have placed upon us. So like when we're in school, you know, we kind of get sorted into categories by our peers and by sort of just our community. Like, you know, okay, you're good at sports, so you're a jock, or you're good at school, so you're you know, an A student, or good looking, you're popular, let's say. And the thing about those is like if we internalize those and we choose to make that a part of our self-worth, like, that's the thing that makes me feel good, well, then what happens when, like, you get old or you graduate and then all of a sudden you're in a college with a bunch of other smart people, or you're playing a sport on a team where everyone else is good, and all of a sudden that's not you anymore. That's not, distinct. That's not your value. Then what's going to happen to your self-worth? Like, at the end of the day, we can't attach our meaning, our value, our self-worth to anything outside of ourselves. Anything. And that's really, really hard to do. It's a lot easier said than done. Because what about your closest relationships, like the things you hold most dear? Like, the fear of losing those things is so overwhelming that we truly feel like we could not live without them. And as difficult as it may seem, we really do have to try to fight that belief and live from a place of purely unconditional self-love. That's really what I think. That is the only thing you can define yourself by. You can't define it by the identity that other people have placed on you or you've placed on yourself, your ability to provide, your appearance, mistakes, your successes, none of it. None of it can define you, because all of those things are fickle. They're all contextually dependent. They can all change. They can all be taken away from you. And I'm not saying to not have goals. I think you should have goals. You should want to be better and to provide and to live a meaningful life. And I think that's what's beautiful about what I was describing earlier with survival, and that we do want to live and that we know we're going to die, is we can decide our own meaning for ourselves. Like, for me, it looks something like working to provide for a family. And for everyone, it's going to look a little bit different. But the biggest thing is that no matter what happens, whether I reach all my dreams, which again you should, I think you should want to make the most of this life, but loving yourself anyway, no matter what. Like, if things don't go the way you want, didn't get the promotion, dealing with loss, feeling like you let someone down, I still love myself. You should still love yourself. Because you do. Because you want to live. You want to survive. That's all the proof that you need, that you do love yourself. It's not really up to you. And, conditional love, man, it's not love. It's, if I just get this, if I just had more money, if I just was a bit better looking, if, then I'd be happy. It's all bullshit. You're alive. You want to live. Therefore, you love yourself. Therefore, that is the only thing that you should define yourself by. So, that's what I think. After 26 years of life, I'm going to go play beer die with my friends.